Hey, Darius Rucker here. I've known these Shady ladies for a long time, and I love to hear their stories, but these tales and opinions are not for the faint of heart. And this podcast is not suitable for children, but then again, neither is the music business. So light one up and lighten up with the Shady ladies of Music City.
I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Susan. Some people refer to us as
the Shady Ladies of Music City. Today we are going to chat with Ebie McFarland, who has a company called Ebie Media and is the PR home of tons of great country singers like Eric Church and Kenny Chesney and George Strait and just everybody you can think of. And we're very excited to talk to her about the differences between then and now.
Well, Ebie, everybody refers to you as a young Evelyn Shriver. And, you know, how successful you are and how many acts you have and how you're able to balance so many and give so much attention to all of them.
Wow, thank you. That is an incredible honor.
Yeah, it's a big compliment.
I will work to lead up to that, hopefully,
you're
live up
already
to
there.
that.
You'll be retiring soon, but there won't be anybody to, as George said, who's going to fill her shoes? I don't know. You know, I don't know about new publicists now, but I know that you do a hell of a job.
Yeah, we're happy to have Ebie here with us today. And we're going to talk about how things are different between when we were active, being then, and as active as she is now. And
she can do it out of her house, which is unbelievable. We never even thought of that. Was never even a possibility for us.
Well, because as much as I hate to admit it, we were pre-computers and had to be in the office to get the big old Xerox machine to make 10,000 copies of all the tour press and stuff. When you think that we used to spend, now we're talking about 30 years ago, I was spending $1,200 a month to rent a Xerox machine.
I mean, I still remember and still do know the closing times of all the FedExes in town. So some things still stay with you. Yeah. Taping or running B-roll. Remember the big B-roll cases, and you had to overnight them.
You did.
For the stations in the local market. So
is Entertainment Tonight still around?
Oh, yes. Yeah, and they still bring in the viewers. I think we saw this with the Super Bowl, where there was a hybrid between streaming, broadcast, but then also social engagement. It was part of the cultural conversation and these kind of on-demand viewings. And, you know, when you get into present day of kind of weaving your artist into those moments, I think you can do it from anywhere because they're everywhere, right? It's not just you have to be in one studio location. They could be a part of the conversation because they commented on a Reba McEntire post, right. Boots with the fur, and, you know, they wrote back, everybody's looking at her. They did that from probably laying in bed hungover the day after the Super Bowl.
I mean, it's amazing to me how you have to react now so quickly to everything. I mean, I think that would be terrifying in, all reality, to have social media be so on top of you like that. I mean, in our day, the worst thing that could happen is that, the Inquirer would call for a quote, but...
Or try to, I remember years ago I was managing an act, and we went to the White House for the Christmas tree lighting. And she was seeing somebody at the time. But the star was there, and they said, oh, well, we know that President Clinton was in the limo with her alone, and it was just not true. But that was the power that the Inquirer and the Star and everything had back then, that I don't think anybody even reads them anymore.
I don't think that they generate the clickbait like they used to. I will say, a lot of times TMZ is kind of that entity present day.
Right.
But they will always, because Harvey, I think, has a attorney foundation and degree, they fact check. So they may call and say, absolutely. They'll call and say, hey, we saw so-and-so was arrested. And a lot of times they've gotten the police report in hand. And I'll say, let me see it, because I want to see what they have. And they'll send it right over. And if they don't, then, you've got a minute. But that's where the negotiating power kind of comes in, because if they want the original comment, then you can talk to them about, well, give me 30 minutes. Let me have something. So that way, at least both sides are represented if it's something minor or a misdemeanor. But if it's something more serious, then you have at least a little window to get with the attorney on an official statement. So to me, it kind of feels like it's in that legal space where a TMZ or somebody like that is really jumping. Otherwise, country kind of permeates through the artists pushing content out on their own, and then a lot of write-arounds present day. It's interesting when you've got a short window now to own the narrative in whatever way, whether that's owning it, apologizing for it, flipping it on its head. I look at what we went through a couple weeks ago.
With Darius.
Well, and before that, even Morgan Wallen.
Yeah.
Where some old recordings, because of a recording deal that he had signed without an attorney present, were being released as a 10th anniversary.
And they were.
And they were planned to be released, but he didn't love them. He didn't like them. He tried to buy them back, couldn't. So instead, the team got together. He went back in the studio, recorded the main driver for the album and the EP. That was a song that was about 90% of the consumption was that one song. So he released his own version, but
he learned from Taylor.
But he pulled the narrative even further because he then pledged $100,000 to a legal aid fund that helps artists so that they would never find themselves in the situation he did with language like in perpetuity in the contract.
Well, I remember a lot of artists, that's really smart of him. And I remember a lot of artists were in that situation where they signed paperwork with managers before they became well known. And the managers had a lot of recordings of theirs and tried to nail them on it.
So, and it's fun. I say fun. It's stressful in the moment, but it's fun whenever you are able to effectively relay the artist's perspective in a way that feels very like everyone, where everybody can kind of rally together around something. And in that moment, it took something that could have been pretty negative, him combating people saying this is his new music and it not being representative of what he wants to put out. And instead, it became something that he now stands for, which not every case is. You may not have the lead time to be as organized. We had two days. We found out on Tuesday and we dropped the news on Thursday.
I remember reading about it.
And that was a lot of stress, but that's what's so exciting about the flip side of, like, instead of reacting, if you can respond with something that's kind of doubles down on what your artist brand is.
That's always the thing, to respond instead of react. But I wondered how you handled it with Darius too, because I know you've represented Darius for years. And when I saw that, I thought, what the hell could they have on Darius Rucker? What did he have, a roach, a joint or something?
Yeah, so with Darius, he was pulled over for expired tags. And when asked if he had anything in the vehicle, he's not going to lie. And so he ended up having misdemeanor charges, which he's working with authorities on. I think, whatever that ends up netting out. But it's kind of one of those things. He's about to release a book, and his book is all about how Hootie and the Blowfish were the biggest party band of the 90s. So he's kind of at that age where he's telling the stories, the real truths in this. So it honestly wasn't even that big of a deal. I mean, granted, we're not encouraging everyone to do drugs or have anything in your vehicle, but in states where marijuana is not legal, you kind of have to remind yourself, like, oh, this is... Well,
that's funny, because that exact same thing happened to us with Willie, and he got pulled over in Texas. And
wasn't he asleep, though, in the car?
Yeah, well, that's true. He was asleep in the car. It was a late night, and he had been playing
poker game.
Poker. And the police came and they asked if he had anything in the car, and he said he did. And the guy arrested him, which was unbelievable in Texas of all places. And I later said to Willie, "Well, why did you tell him?" He said, "I'm not going to let them tear apart my Mercedes because of an ounce of pot under the seat."
Yeah.
And of course, particularly in Texas, the sheriff, everybody was friends with Willie. And couldn't believe that somebody had actually arrested him.
Where did this happen with Darius?
In Franklin, Williamson County.
So he knew.
Just cruising around daytime.
Daytime?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, right, that those stories used to kind of be these huge headlines. And I think that news, it hit a minute of a cycle. But then by end of day Friday, people had already started texting me saying, oh, wait, that's not legal there, and so it just kind of
Well, nowadays you have the advantage that it is legal in so much of the country, but back then it wasn't legal anywhere, unfortunately.
No, and Willie had an ounce. I don't think Darius probably had an ounce.
It's interesting though, because I think that's the best thing an artist can do is tell the truth.
Yes, it's the only option.
It's the only option. And that has not changed then versus now. That is still a prevailing truth.
The difference now that I realize is that the history is whoever last wrote it. And, it changes with, the people involved. And you're always telling the artist to tell the truth, but there may be the only one telling the truth, and everybody else has adapted their story to fit the other person's moments.
At least they didn't, make Darius get out and get on the ground or do anything like that, which easily could have happened.
Yeah, it's an interesting time when things are so heightened. I think everyone just kind of assumes they're always on camera, and some people that makes them act a little better, I hope.
Well, because they are on camera. And that's very weird. Everything's so instantaneous. I mean, and people have the patience of a nanosecond or something before they're on to something new. So sometimes the best, thing is to do nothing because it'll pass in a matter of, an hour. But it seems to be a much smarter business that you're functioning in than the business that we functioned in.
She seems smarter than we were.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know about that. I think the teams...
Because there are teams. There didn't used to be teams. I mean, the older artists, like, say, the Tammy and George generation, Willie's generation, Willie never had a personal publicist until I did it. And, it was like the label was the parent who provided all the services, publicity,
and they treated the label
whatever.
like the parent.
Yeah, Tammy would be afraid to, even say what she wanted.
That's right. If she didn't like the tracks that she cut, she wouldn't tell anybody.
And then during our time, the independent publicist became, the common thing. But none of the management companies had teams. They didn't have their own radio people. They didn't have their own publicists. They didn't have their own marketing people. You constantly had to go back to the label for all of those things because they controlled the money.
And now there's like Louis Messina, who I know you work with. And there's like, Klinsoff. Who's Darius's manager?
Clarence and Chris Parr over at Maverick.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our management teams, we're really spoiled. We work with Marion, with Miranda, with Q Prime, John Peets on Ashley McBride and Eric Church. We work with Clint Hyam on Kenny Chesney and Brantley Gilbert. The sophistication of the support system is, I think, the biggest differentiator from...
we worked with, the uncle or the weird cousin.
The brother that just kind of inherited the job. It was not
like a management team by any stretch, the bus driver or something.
Whoever the personal assistant could be that could get answers on the day, today on the road. Yeah.
So it has become a much more sophisticated business, a much savvier business. It's not like that down home kind of, let's all, have a barbecue together. It's a different world.
It is a different world. And I felt sorry for Darius when that happened because I thought, but it's 2024. It's probably not going to be that big a deal.
I agree. I think things that used to feel career milestones across the board, good and bad, we don't sit in them as long, right? So like a platinum record used to be the biggest thing. Now we're having trouble even scheduling time for a diamond presentation because the artist is so busy doing 5 other ventures, so it's like the music has to serve everything and be the foundation and bedrock for it. But they've gotten so busy because the merchandising, the touring.
Because they've all become brands.
Exactly.
And that's a very strange position I think, for a lot of artists. But they seem to be handling it because they have these teams around them. And they've become very busy. It's a strange thing. Our time, the artists were much more like, say, artist-oriented. I wonder, where are the protest songs? With all the crazy shit going on in the world, there's not, nobody's complaining about it. Nobody's protesting unless you hear something I haven't heard.
No, I think a lot of people are trying to create unifying music or unifying collaborations.
Like who?
Like you have artists doing shows like Blackbird Presents, who does the Willie Nelson's 90th. They did a big kind of piece through music, All Sing, right? Like a programmed 2-hour where they brought everyone from Jack Johnson to Ziggy Marley to, Michael Franti in across genres. But it seems to be happening more in the alternative space than in country.
And alternative and Americana.
Yeah, and Americana.
And it doesn't happen that much in country.
Well, look at Miranda, I guess, is just putting out a duet.
With Enrique.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
And there are so many artists.
But that's not protest music.
No, that's very different. I think a lot of people, for better or worse, took the Dixie Chicks Toby moment that happened.
And they got afraid. And they were afraid that they would be ostracized from the business. And they probably would be. And so a lot of people are afraid to speak up about anything anymore because of the whole politically correct thing. And that's changed everything.
And I think that's a real, disservice to music. I mean, your music should reflect the times. And I don't really feel like it is.
I don't see anybody's music reflecting the times now.
A lot of escapism.
Right. Because that's what people
Nostalgia.
want. They don't want to think about war and about bombs and about Russia and about Israel and about China. And, people are, I think, afraid. And a lot of people think it's like end times.
Well, remember what happened when Bill Clinton had to explain what a blowjob was on national cable, and it made everyone. There were two households. There was either the household who left the TV on and said, "We want to hear what he has to say."
What his explanation is,
or there was the household that said, "You're not going to say that in around our family dinner," and turned the TV off. And I think at that time, media kind of followed and started catering to both arms. The people who want to be informed and the people who want to kind of have their head in the sand. And I think country music has had a couple versions, events happen that, have caused them. Look at the pandemic. I think we all needed live music to come back and be happy and be a place we gathered and like tuned the world out for a few years. And I think we're still in that window where we're a little bit blinders on, where we just want to come together and put our arms around each other for an hour and a half and forget about it and then go back to our lives. So I think,
the pandemic
maybe
changed everything.
It did. And I think music is a reflection of that more so than it is of the times. It's of the escapism that we all, I think that musicians still think, and probably rightfully so, that the country needs.
That's right. And people are afraid to protest. People were afraid that the government would come after them. People were afraid that certain politicians would come after them in revenge. And, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But we think that it could be. And so, a lot of artists are terrified. Like, in this whole Middle East thing, a lot of people have not come out and said anything.
And I don't know that you're going to see anybody in country music kind of try to take that on.
No, there's nobody in country music that has any clue. My confusion about the lack of anything reflecting the times is not necessarily to just, be the negatives, but, it is important at this moment in time for somebody to do something a bit soulful, yeah. I would think. Because it seems to me that a lot of the audience that seems to be suffering is the country music audience, if they fall into that category. I mean, there seems to be a lot of confusion going on.
Well, there's a lot of confusion about who the country music audience is anymore.
It's an interesting time. I think our artists are also trying to navigate it, because I sit around tables like this and hear them kind of come to terms with what they want to sing about versus what they may stand for in their personal lives. And I just don't think they're there yet. I think a lot of them, like I said, maybe found when music went away, that was their livelihood. Some people doubled down, wrote 2-3 albums. Other people started looking at, to your point, Evelyn, about the brands, they started looking at, how do I diversify into other avenues, community building, what other ventures excite me? Because when they were sitting there,
thinking they'd never tour again,
it scared them at a very fundamental basis.
So they all opened these big bars where everybody could crowd together and say that
and
they
get
were
COVID. Right, where like
Can't tour, but
for
we
years
get all
I didn't
crowd
go out
into
of the
this
house,
room.
and I grew to realize that I don't really like going out that much. And I think that happened to a lot of people, and I think that that's what happened to live music too. A lot of people think, well, I can watch this on YouTube, which is true. You can watch anything on YouTube.
Well, I think people were dying for live music again. I think that's why the touring business just, skyrocketed, because people were sick of being shut in.
I don't know has the touring business skyrocketed?
Oh, yes. I mean, there is so much. I honestly question how many festivals
There
our
could be.
industry can support.
And they're so expensive for people to go to. I mean,
there's very much a YOLO mentality that's carried through even into 2024. And I see fans who used to spend their money at like CMA Fest, right? That was their pilgrimage every year to see their favorite people. Now they're spending it for Tortuga, or they're spending it for Stagecoach, and they're renting these massive Airbnbs. They're programming everything they want to see around it. Brands have realized it, and they're kind of jumping into the country. I mean, you've got Coachella, which is not sold out yet.
I know. I can't believe it. It's the first year ever.
And Stagecoach that sold out within, a week of on sale? And we have all three headliners, Morgan, Eric, and Miranda. And, I think other labels, Elektra, Island, other people outside New York and, in New York and LA are looking at Nashville and going, what are they building that is community centered, that is permeating and resonating beyond one song, one album? And it goes back to what I think artists like Eric Church and Kenny Chesney do really well, which is kind of the community of it. They create, whether it's No Shoes Nation or the church choir, you belong to something. And now we see it,
it's
identity
like the Taylor
politics.
Swift thing too,
Swifties, right.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't ever looked at it like that.
I've never looked at that either. I mean,
But I look at somebody who does what he does
and
so
it
well.
goes back to the Jimmy Buffett thing of creating that community.
Well, Jimmy was the originator.
Yeah, definitely. But
I think as you make certain decisions in your life, like Eric Church deciding to go away from the long-haired, blue-eyed boy with Smoke a Little Smoke, wear sunglasses, talk about smoking weed, that was a left when the label wanted him to stay with the Pretty Boys, Dirks, and everybody else that was kind of coming up at the same time. And because he made a couple decisions that just showed people who he was in that moment, gifts, like we were talking about earlier, like turning a negative into kind of a gift, people identify and kind of go, I see what that guy stands for. I stand for that too. And then once you've been hooked on that, you're a part of that for a long time. Your kids go to the shows with you. I mean, it's Taylor, it's Kenny, it's Eric. Now you're seeing it with Morgan, whether people kind of said, we won't let them cancel him, or, whatever, like I believe in this song, Cover Me Up, or Seven Summers, or I want that nostalgia. Whatever it is, they connected with him over the last 2 years. And
they did, and I think they connected with him mainly because he got in trouble for doing something that most of them do anyhow.
I think he owned up to his mistake.
He did.
And when you can't.
And he made a great album.
Yeah, and he makes incredible and he's traditional country. Again, he was the tip of the arrow of it coming back into that direction, which I think country is better for, because we're getting back to what people connected with when it was first, like,
sort
the
of.
great.
I don't think that there's that many authentic sounding country records out today. I think that they're all derivative of other stuff.
I think the fact that songs are getting back to having intros again, where you can instantly recognize it, is great. It's not just the track, the click track. So I do love that we have some artists that are really doubling down on real bands that aren't just using, studio.
Well, I think artists nowadays have so much more freedom. And it goes back to these teams of people they have that can fight with the label about whatever's going on. In our day, the label, again, controlled everything. The producer controlled everything. The artist was, discouraged from writing and using their own songs.
That's right. And the artist was discouraged from protesting and doing anything. And they were all terrified of the label.
So it really kind of, because everybody had their specific job, you still got great songs because there's, a world of songwriters that write, fabulous songs that maybe were busier back then than they are now, that everybody, is writing their own stuff. But I think that the artist has a lot more freedom for their own creative.
Well, remember when Johnny Cash came out, the big picture of him giving the finger to radio. And that was his attitude towards radio because they never embraced him. I don't think he ever had a hit on radio until after he died. And, now you don't want to be adversarial to radio, but there's nobody like Johnny Cash now. There's no rebels out there that I see.
Well, I see quite a few rebels out there right now. Well, I think, it seems to me Morgan Wallen, Eric Church has been a big rebel.
But Eric Church has been around for longer than Morgan Wallen.
Well, I don't know who the new artists are, the brand new artists. To me, they're still new artists. So
I think there's some groundbreaking artist moves coming out sonically. So like you have, not to like self-promote some of our clients, but because I know their story's the best, like Ian Munsick is one of the first artists kind of from Wyoming having real commercial success in the form of a major record deal. He's got a massive New Yorker profile coming out. He's been on CBS Mornings.
I don't even
Kelly
know who
Clarkson. He's a Warner Brothers artist with an incredible falsetto, but like Bobby Bones just now came on. So
Right.
Everything is kind of building. And then it's interesting to see radio come in after he's already headlining Red Rocks and, selling 3,000 to 6,000 capacity venues. So it's a different,
it's a
kind of like
different
Lainey,
approach.
different approach. Lainey, it took her 10 years.
It did.
Ashley McBride took
And I think
11.
Lainey was discovered by Taylor Sheridan. And I think that he finding her and putting her in that show is what kicked off her career.
And we've seen that happen with Whiskey Myers, one of our bands who they were featured in an episode of Yellowstone, and then their music's been synced 3 or 4 times. And they play Red Rocks. Like, and I say Red Rocks because, that's a 10,000 capacity venue. And they do multiple nights. And like used to, you couldn't do that unless you had these other things.
Big radio hits. That's amazing. That really encourages me that, the music's managing to get heard without going through the major, main gatekeepers that have.
Which has always been radio heretofore.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's changed is when you guys were doing, and Evelyn, when you had your shop, I mean, even getting an Entertainment Tonight was a big deal. Huge deal. And now I think managers are so used to keeping score with what other artists are doing. And that's probably coming because the artists are keeping score, if we're being honest. Mm-hmm. But they think that they should have certain things, which you can go out and get, but you get once. And so if that doesn't move the needle for the Today Show or Good Morning America or Jimmy Kimmel,
People Magazine,
any of those, then you've wasted. It's that analogy John Peets always says of like the flaming arrow into the abyss. Like you lit nothing on fire. And I looked at what the Barbie movie did, right? And borrowing from Hollywood.
That was the smartest thing. But they also had Mattel with them. And they were co-marketers, and they were really brilliant how they did that. Because did you watch the movie?
Multiple times. But even down to their Oscar campaign, when you see Colbert having these kind of very intentional TV looks with their cast.
Yeah.
And I just think we've gotten a little lazy as an industry where people think, we should have TV for the sake of TV. Well, no, you should deliver a great TV moment, a great award show moment, like a Chris Stapleton, Justin Timberlake, like a Valerie June, Eric Church, changing from black and white to full color with her in the red. And like have moments that people want to talk about. Like, don't just have the moment for the sake of the moment.
Well, and that's a very new thing in country music because, one, there never used to be any moments. Nobody wanted to spend a dime on production or anything. And how cheap could you get away with the Country Act? And that, there were never moments. You go to the Grammys and if you were lucky enough to get a performance spot, all of a sudden the country spot was like a nothing production.
And it wasn't on camera.
No, I mean, it was on camera at that moment in time, but it was just like no production. And the next, hip hop act or somebody would come in and they'd have like, everything short of flying, monkeys and horses.
And they still do, but I remember when they tried to get Ricky Van to Hot Country Nights. Remember that show? That was like a Dick Clark thing, and they tried to get him to have dancers and stuff. And it was so antithetical to Ricky, and it looked so inauthentic to have him up there with all those dancers. And he was like an unbelievable singer.
But, yeah, I mean, the point is that country never created moments. Now, Ken Cragen, who was a big manager of Kenny Rogers and Lionel Richie and all that.
Travis Tritt and Trisha Yearwood. And
he would always say you have to have 3 TV moments in a row, 3 major hits in a row, so that it makes an impression, because people won't, react from one impression. But, you also have to pick the moment, and that's, what you were talking about is it doesn't pay off if there's
It used to be that if you went on the Johnny Carson show, you would sell 25,000 more albums that week on SoundScan. Now, I don't think that television has that kind of impact as far as sales go.
I mean, Darius and I talk about it all the time, because for a year, David Letterman would just look at the camera deadpan and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Hootie and the Blowfish."
Right.
Just randomly. I mean, people laugh now that even in the Oscar campaigns, Jimmy Kimmel's making fun of Matt Damon in the ad, but he got that from Letterman doing it with Hootie, of my apologies to Matt Damon. And those moments, I think, when they are meaningful, permeate. And I think to Ken's kind of legendary approach of 3 things, I still think you need a few things to stand on, because you can't just be one-dimensional.
No, you can't just stand on one cover.
No, you've got to have multiple things. And I think when that happens, the dominoes fall. But you can't just have those 3 things done, you stacked up. You have to have more, which is where the strategy for a lot of these artists, like the artists are finally participating, and like not just a Kenny Chesney, but even newer artists are finally like kind of saying,
this is my career,
Yep.
and I want to participate.
Here's how I want to show up. And that's different.
Yeah,
that's
way
different.
Very different.
No. It's an exciting time to be in Nashville and in country music. I mean, I think there are so many avenues that artists can use to get.
You're the first person that said that.
I think
all
it
the
is.
interviews we've done, and that's very encouraging to hear.
Now, do you do the social media aspect of it also within your office, or do people hire a separate social media company?
There are a couple different ways to approach that. So the label usually has a digital person. The touring entity has a digital person, right? So they're constantly doing ads and boosting posts. A lot of the initial copy and art comes across our desk, and then it's kind of localized or personalized. But like if we have a big announcement, we, because Instagram, you can put up to 2,200 characters in the actual caption. So we will have a hand in what is that accompanies the image and the graphic, just because that's what's going to get picked up. Used to, it was like you kind of labor over the press release.
Right.
Now we have the press release, but it's supporting and linking to kind of what the artist is saying to the consumer, so that the media knows here's what's being said and here's the backstory. And by the way, here's everything you'll need in a quick download, so that you're not having to like screen grab, find the post. I mean, it's so much more complicated now of like how it leads, and if the artist leads first or if a media outlet breaks it.
Yeah, I just know that it used to be, because I was a big Instagram person for years. And it used to be that, Beyonce broke her album, Drunk in Love, on Instagram by doing little bits of the song, by teasing the audience. And when she came out, she sold millions of records. I've never seen a country artist do that.
Well, that's how Morgan Wallen has kind of built his.
But after he had that whole incident happen.
Well, but he would always preview little snippets of songs as like a gauge if somebody would, if the fan base enjoyed the song or not. And that was really smart, because I think it gave him a barometer of what they want next from him. But he, some of these artists that write a lot of their music and kind of have their posses around them, like they know the concept of the record, and then they just try to fill in the gaps so that it's this kind of complete thing. And it'll be really interesting to see with the new Grammy rules that, because 75% of the record can't be out before the release in order to be eligible for some of the categories. And that'll be really interesting to see, because in country music, you know, it can take 50 plus weeks to have a song run up the charts. So, you know, it's a longer process, and an artist can't release just one song a year. I mean, there's no way to feed the fan base. You have to be releasing music every 12 weeks, at least covers, acoustic versions of your songs, the video for the song, but other music for people to go down the rabbit hole on. And if you have to do that, how do you keep that to just 25% of what the full 100% album is? Like, that's going to be our biggest challenge over the next year, is these artists that have always been kind of critical darlings. How do you fit that while still being in commercial country? I don't know how that is going to shake out yet.
They're going to have to follow the rule.
Or they're going to have to change the rule, because, you know, we're a society now of instant, constant information. And an artist can't go that long without feeding the beast.
Or you'll see more of these 36 song records.
Well, that's an interesting idea too.
How many albums come out now that are 36 songs?
Well, both of Morgan's, his first one, Dangerous, was 30, I think. And then the one that I helped set up was One Thing at a Time, and that's 36 songs. Eric Church's Heart and Soul was 29, 30? I mean, between the fan only version, the ampersand and. So, you know, it's an interesting, and like Ashley McBride, she released all of Lindyville as like a concept record.
Yeah, that was a brilliant record.
And that was very intentional to kind of carve a lane. So again, when you kind of expected her to follow up the number one with a very straight down the middle, like easy to play follow up, she went concept and really kind of doubled down on the artistic creativity side to just remind people that's where she lives. And then she was able to come out with The Devil I Know with kind of more of a radio. I mean, it's, you know, but you're working with artists and teams that are just so savvy. And
teams. See, that's a new concept for me in the music business and country music. Teams.
It is. I mean, either you're putting on the best PR spin I've ever heard in my life about all of this.
I know. I'm sitting here in shock.
Or you're just so much smarter than the way we approached it. I mean, we were just, you know, you had an artist who hardly knew they were an artist, and you had a team that involved, you know, like a wife or a girlfriend and a cousin. And the uncle. And you're out there trying to explain, you know, that this is a show, you know. So it's great to hear that it's so much more sophisticated.
It is, because, you know,
not that it's so great that it's more sophisticated, because who knows what the hell that really means anyhow.
Everyone always said that the publicist got paid less than the bus driver.
That may still be true.
Really?
I have to ask our interns when they come in, this is great for you to experience and make sure you want to do it, but it takes a very special person to enjoy PR, because you can't be reliant on the artist for where you find your satisfaction and your fulfillment, right? Like, the gratitude is sometimes there. I do think that they're grateful, but in moments you don't really get to live in the moment.
Well,
right?
That's where
there's
I think
always
you're
something
smarter
else.
also, because, you know, you have made a definite, deliberate choice to have a personal life and a marriage and all of that. I've been married, you know, my entire life as well, but I didn't carve out as much personal time as I should have. And, you know, you can't look too much to the artist for that personal satisfaction, because in the
fulfillment
end,
doesn't come from the artist.
The day that the money stops changing hands, it sort of goes away, because it's the nature of what the game is. If you're not paying somebody or they're not paying you.
I think we've found the fulfillment in our team. Like, our team together shows up for one another in a really great way. Like, I think you guys have seen it with Clint Hyam and his team at Morris Hyam. Like, you know, you've got the support, and you know, if you want to say what if, you've got some people who will help you figure out if the answer is yes.
And that includes Louis and his team.
Absolutely.
And that never was the way it was before. The promoters, everything was always
the venues
separate.
were very separate, and there was no plan.
Yeah.
You know, the plan was to, you know,
have a hit.
Mm-hmm. And now I think the fulfillment comes from the process, and then also like the life that the process and the clients afford you to have. Like, it's wonderful. We can go to any concert at any time and take our friends. My friends from my hometown, I grew up, I think you guys know this, from all the Loretta stuff. Yep, Waverly, Tennessee. And I'm still incredibly close with all my high school girlfriends. You know a couple of them, you know Summer. And, you know, Melissa and Allison go to Kenny Chesney with me once a year. We find a concert and go together. And that's where it's like, this is what it's about. It's John Paul, my husband, being able to come out and go to a George Strait show and look around and go, wow, look at what, you know, you've been a part of for 12 years with, you know, because of people like Louis Messina, who brought us in pre-Cowboy Rides Away, and Irv Woolsey. Right. I mean, Irv Woolsey, what a wonderful human.
Did you hear anything about Irv?
Yeah, Irv, you know, Irv has Ian Munsick. Irv signed Ian Munsick, and he's got some really great staffers that are, you know, because Irv has just been with George Strait for,
he had Leanne Womack.
40 years. Yes. And he had Leanne and Jamie, and I mean, he's so thoughtful.
And Clay Walker.
And he and Louis Messina together, what they're doing with George Strait in the live space is just a masterclass in artist vision and execution, because George didn't love jumping on a tour bus every weekend. So what did they do? They designed these one-off shows with a lineup with people, with Chris Stapleton and Little Big Town, that makes him giddy. I mean, he's giddy to step on stage, and he's excited. And it's led to a whole new album where, you know, he and Bubba and Dean and even Jesse Joe Dillon, you know, they've got songs that he's excited about. And I look at those and I go, the momentum from just the movement of what's happening live is leading to this whole new kind of chapter in George's career that none of us could have seen coming. But it's because people like Louis Messina get the team so fired up.
See, I didn't know any of this.
You know, that's a great thing, I guess, about the new business, because it certainly wasn't that way in the olden days. But
the olden days, like 10 years ago, it wasn't that way. But more like 30 years ago, it wasn't that way.
Well, and the production is so, I mean, it's so another level.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I know. Kenny's shows that we've gone to see, his production is unbelievable.
Talk about a masterclass.
Yeah.
I mean, go out and watch his band and crew set up, the rehearsal, the screen content that he films year round.
Right.
He has the best crew I've ever, you know, band and team around him that I've ever seen in my life on the road. I mean, it's just second to none.
And
and they treat you so wonderfully, and they treat everybody so wonderfully. It's, you know,
they're happy.
It's such a vibe backstage. It's great if you're even just front of house, but when you walk into the production office and you're so welcomed,
right?
I mean, that talk about community
and everything. You know, everybody's so you know, generous with each other. It's a great thing to see. We never saw that because we had a lot of acts that all they wanted to do was leave the building, get there as late as possible, and anybody. Leave.
No meet and greets, no radio, everybody was the enemy. And meanwhile, these were all the people that they needed.
And it definitely feels like circles are getting tighter in the sense that everyone serves a very specific purpose. So if you're not kind of feeding that, I think a lot of like the hangers on have dropped off. Like, it's not a posse. There's not an entourage. Everyone there is absolutely working, which is wonderful to see. But the teams, because of everything you have to do digitally, in PR, the brands, the extensions that they have that have activations on site, but everyone's there doing their part. And it's so impressive to see of just how it comes together and how it's such a well-oiled machine. I mean, when we were releasing one thing at a time with Morgan, we had this mentality of show me what you're about, don't tell me, right? Because we'd all kind of heard enough. We wanted to see what he stood for, and he gave that free show downtown at Bridgestone.
Right.
And we were all in Knoxville for, in his hometown, for a Spotify free show at the high school, an activation where he went back to Gibbs High School to give back to the senior class for their kind of, you know, spring break kind of celebration. And so we were just getting fed all of these images from downtown of people wrapped around 6-7 blocks waiting in line because you had to show up to get a ticket. And, you know, it became something that started on socials, him announcing it, but then we were able to get affiliates and news people down to the stations on the roofs to where it was then talked about on Today's Show. And, so it's a different, you can go top down, but you can also kind of go bottom up. But that I couldn't have done that because I was in Knoxville. My team in my office, right, in our office, did that along with the management team, the label, the social media team. We all came together sharing.
That's great.
And that's where, if you have that as you're coming up as an artist and you build it, where I see it dissolving is when people decide that maybe they need to change teams. I think that's probably one of the biggest detriments I see to an artist's career is when they don't stay with the person that brought them this far.
Yeah.
Well, there used to be that line that, you can always tell somebody that's really successful because there's one person that you can call that's been with them forever. And that's what Merle Kilgore used to say all the time about Hank and everybody. There's one person that you can call and you'll know that person can get the artist.
Oh, Merle, he told me about double dating with Elvis and how he got the girls because Elvis wouldn't say no onion on his burger.
Right. There aren't that many characters like that anymore.
No.
Sister, as he would have.
That's
it.
right.
Yes.
That's where Hank got it.
Rich.
Yeah.
Well, Ebie, thanks so much for spending the time with us. We really enjoyed it.
It was
Thank
a
you for
great
having me.
podcast.
We are so impressed with what you are doing
We
and
are.
have done. And I'm flattered that anybody thinks that you're even, any kind of comparison to me because you've so impressed me with your
Yeah, you really have a lot of
approach to
information.
business.
Oh, thank you. The fact that I get to sit and have story time and just listen to the comparisons and have you share wisdom. I think one thing that none of us have done a good job of on the way up is kind of sharing the stories in the moment for other generations to learn from.
Well, there aren't. I mean, there's not any.
So
Nobody's telling the stories from the past. Nobody's telling what it was like to be Loretta or Dolly or Tammy.
Well,
or
I'm sure
Dottie
they have
West.
all that at the Hall of Fame if you went
But
down
it's nice
there
to
and
hear.
listened.
But it's great to hear from your perspective of what worked because some of those things are still true today, just on through a different medium. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and we'll be sure to catch you off guard. So light one up and lighten up. Share and tell your friends, then rate, review, and subscribe. Don't be quiet about this. We need you to tell everyone.
And we mean everyone. We are putting our faith in your hands.
We are.
For more information on the podcast, please visit www.shadyladiesofmusiccity.com.
Shady Ladies of Music City is recorded and produced in Nashville, Tennessee, and presented by the Morris Hyam Management.
Our executive producer is Clint Hyam.
Our producer is Kyle Quigley.
Our engineer and editor is Robert Schaefers. Robert has also written and performed our theme music.